Well, it's the end of yet another week, and here on this channel that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you the viewers to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, the Milwaukee Bucks were crowned champions for the season, and the NBA draft is also approaching quickly, so of course there's plenty for us to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, so if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, it turns out about 61% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing comes to us from McChicken Noodle, and they say that the Suns should trade Chris Paul if they want to remain championship contenders moving forward because of his age. So, the Suns just came up short in the finals with the Bucks, finishing them off in 6 games earlier this week to be crowned champions, and honestly, this was likely the best chance and maybe the last chance Chris Paul will have at winning a championship. Next season, the West will be back reloaded as the All-Stars that suffered injuries will be back returning healthy. Every offseason we see a big shakeup in the league with new teams rising every year, and there's no guarantee that they'll make it back to the finals. With all of that being said though, this particular take is incredibly overreactionary. A lot of people were sitting back and hoping they would get a chance to slander Chris Paul in the finals if he came up short, and unfortunately, he didn't play his best basketball down the stretch of the series, so that is exactly what is happening. But we can't just forget everything he did to get the Suns to where they were in the first place. I've always been the first one to point out the growth of the entire team as a whole being the cause of their emergence, not just because of Chris Paul, but Chris Paul definitely did jumpstart them a bit, and they're not just going to ship him out after one season where the team accomplished more than it had in literal decades with him. Sure, he may be getting up there in age, but the Suns' window definitely is not closed to win a title either, so it's kind of ridiculous to suggest otherwise. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from Goats MJ, and he says that the Hawks this year are like the Miami Heat team last year as teams that overachieved. I believe what he's trying to say is that, like last year's Heat season, the Hawks achieved a lot more postseason success this year than anybody saw coming, and then next year, when they go into the season with more expectations, they probably won't be able to replicate it again, just like the Heat this year. Competing for a championship and making deep playoff runs is incredibly difficult, and every year, really good teams fall short of doing it, so you can never take for granted a team making it far in the playoffs in any given season. The Hawks shockingly upset the top-seeded 76ers this season, and with their budding superstar Trae Young leading the way, they will definitely enter next season expected to be one of the best teams in the East. However, as we learned with the Miami Heat, sometimes it's easier to play the role of the overachieving underdog than it is to be the heavy favorite, because when the Heat tried to defend their Eastern Conference title this year, they ended up getting swept in the first round. It unfortunately is very possible that the Hawks will suffer a similar fate next season, but when I say that, I don't really mean it as a slight at all. I just mean that they're not necessarily on the timeline of competing for a title quite yet, and like we saw with the Heat last year, they don't have many avenues to drastically improve, so other teams may be able to pass them up. This shouldn't worry the Hawks though, because unlike last year's Heat team, they are very young and still have many years ahead of them as potential contenders, so this year is not a make or break season. I still think they'll be a top team in the East next year, but as the Bucks just proved after getting swept in last year's playoffs, you can't really count out any of the other top teams whose season ended in disappointment this year, because they can all bounce back next year and be better. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from Alaire, and they say that Evan Mobley is still the second best player in the draft this year, and that many people are buying into the hype of Jalen Green over him because of his dazzling play style. The 2021 NBA draft is coming up this week, and for many teams it represents the future of their franchise. This year's class is pretty stacked with talent top to bottom, and especially at the top, there are quite a few big decisions that are going to be made. Most people accept that Cade Cunningham is the top prospect, but then the debate for who's number 2 has been raging on for weeks now, as both Evan Mobley and Jalen Green bring completely different things to the table, but are both immensely talented players, and could both end up having all-star careers. Jalen Green is a shooting guard who can score from all 3 levels, he's comfortable creating for himself and making tough shots, he's explosive, and when he's on, he's definitely fun to watch. Evan Mobley, on the other hand, represents everything you could want from a modern-day big man, as he protects the rim and blocks shots, he runs in transition, he holds his own against any matchup on defense, and he has great touch around the basket. Ultimately, the teams picking at number 2 and 3, whether it remains the Rockets and Cavaliers or if teams trade up to get those picks, will be picking between these two, based on what they want, more between a guard and a big man, because it's very tough to say without a doubt that one is better than the other. I personally would probably slightly lean towards Mobley over Green, but I definitely see why others would lean towards Green. And while his dazzling playstyle definitely does factor into it, it's not the whole reason at all. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Tyler, and he says that Giannis could end up being the best power forward to ever play the game by the time he's done, and at the moment, it's between him or Kevin Durant for the title of the best player in the league. When you lead your team to a championship and dominate the series as hard as Giannis just did, all of the praise that follows suit is completely justified. He's undoubtedly one of the best players in the history of the game, and as a 2-time MVP winner, a Defensive Player of the Year winner, a champion, and now Finals MVP now, he's achieved almost everything you can do at age 26 already. Tim Duncan is without question the best power forward of all time, and expecting Giannis to surpass him is a lot to ask, but it's also not necessarily absurd to think that he could do so one day. Again, he's only 26 years old and has already won pretty much every major award. He'll definitely need more longevity to his dominance and probably a few more championships on his resume to actually do so, but it's definitely not impossible. As for the Giannis vs Durant argument, I would probably also agree with this one as well, and would choose Giannis right now because you can't just pick against him after the performance he just put on. I know a lot of people are going to say LeBron should still be in the conversation, but after the way the Lakers went out this year, it's probably time to come to terms with the fact that LeBron's getting up there in age, and he is slowing down a little bit. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes we discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.